911, what's your emergency? 911, what's your emergency?
Be advised, Car 4 has control of the pursuit. Proceed with caution.
Hello, everyone. How is everybody? I hope you all had a really great holiday with your family and your friends. We're approaching the end of 2024, which is hard to believe. Time is just going. So today I'm going to talk about the Evansdale case. The Evansdale murders that happened in July of 2012. And this case is still unsolved, and it just needs a lot of eyes on it, in my opinion, because I do believe that it's very solvable. I believe that this case can be solved. I believe that it eventually will be solved. And it's my hope for the families in this case. But two young cousins in a very small, sleepy town in Iowa, Evansdale, Elizabeth Collins and Lyric Cook-Morrisey went out for a little bike ride on a beautiful summer day in July in 2012. And they were tragically snatched up by some monster and murdered. And that person is still at large to this very day. They were 8 and 10 years old. Elizabeth was 8 and Lyric was 10. They were just bright lights in their families, and just loving, sweet little girls who were very sheltered in a sense because they really didn't know a stranger. They loved spending time together. They were together all the time. They were best friends. They liked being outdoors. They liked to sing together, play dress up. And Drew Collins would say that they would often choreograph dance routines together to face their neighbors. And they really were like sisters because they were together all the time. But these little girls' lives were cut short, and they never got to grow up and experience all the wonderful things that teenagers get to experience and adults get to experience. Their families and generations of their families were robbed of so many things and so many firsts. On a summer afternoon in 2012, they went for a bike ride together. Their grandmother was watching them, and she allowed them to go out for a bike ride. The girls ended up going what is thought to be near a lake in the northeast part of the town. And that's where the girls were last seen. And then they vanished. All that was left behind were their bikes and Elizabeth Collins's purse with a cell phone that she used to play on inside. The cell phone wasn't active, but she used the cell phone to play on. And it was thrown over a fence and was hanging in some bushes. Months of worry descended on this town, and it became the parents of both little girls' worst nightmare that they could have ever imagined. Elizabeth and Lyric would not be found for 5 long months. Their bodies were found in December by hunters 20 miles away from where they were last seen together. 12 years later, here we are. Their deaths are still shrouded in mystery and treated as a double murder. Drew Collins has often said that he's unable to escape the summer of 2012. And how could you not? His life basically stood still that day in so many respects, even though it also imploded in other respects. Despite a conflated effort between local and federal law enforcement, the victims' families, and the Evansdale locals, the killer has never been identified. Their case has been recently put under a microscope because a new 3-part Netflix documentary, Taken Together, Who Killed Lyric and Elizabeth, was recently released. Dylan Sayers, who put together the documentary, set out to do something which authorities have, as of yet, failed to do, and that is track down the little girl's killer. Dylan Sayers was a local cameraman who was there during the initial searching for the girls. And this case has stuck with him all these years later. And now, as a documentary film producer, he decided to try and do something to help this case. Evansdale is home to about 4,000 people, and it's a very close-knit kind of community. But Drew Collins said that he would never let his 8-year-old go on a bike ride without an adult. And Elizabeth and Lyric were dropped off at their grandmother Wilma Collins's house in downtown Evansdale on the morning of July 13th, 2012, to be minded while their parents were busy and at work. Drew Collins ran a very busy tree surgeon business. Their grandmother, Wilma, who took a more laissez-faire approach parenting, let the girls go out on their bicycles. And they pedaled away at about 12:15 p.m. after their grandma told them to be home soon, because Lyric's mom was supposed to be coming. After an hour, the girls were still not home, and the cousins were last sighted alive between 12:30 p.m. and 1 p.m. by Gilbert Drive next to Myers Lake. Myers Lake is a destination park type place in the northeast side of the city. And it's a favorite among anglers, fishermen. It was about 5 feet deep, and it was filled with algae. Almost 3 hours had passed, and Wilma alerted her daughter, Heather, who rushed home from work before finally calling the police. Drew remembers that he had just got in from work when his wife, Heather, told him that the girls were missing. They'd gone, evaporated into thin air, Drew would say. Upon their search, authorities and the family found the bikes along with Collins's cell phone inside her purse at the lake's southeast corner. The area where the bikes were found is surrounded by 8-foot fences, and Elizabeth's purse was found strewn over one of them. It was thrown over the fence and landed hanging in some bushes. When Drew found the purse over the fence, he really started to get nervous. Days would pass, and local volunteers flocked in their droves to assist this family and the police in the search for these 2 little girls. The sheriff's office joined the search by Saturday, shortly before, or shortly along with the FBI and the Department of Criminal Investigations of Iowa. Police drained Myers Lake as the FBI sent their divers in to some of its deeper underwater pockets. The first theory was that the girls may very well have fallen into the lake and drowned, or had decided it was a very hot day, that they may have wanted to wade and get their feet wet and fallen in. Candlelight vigils and press conferences were held, yet there was still no sight of Elizabeth and Lyric, and no one came forward. Collins was stuck in a nightmare, but Drew still had to work. He still had to put food on the table. He had employees who worked for him, who depended upon him and his business. So he still had to go to work every day, knowing his little girl was out there somewhere and he couldn't find her. He would say that he would just go till he broke, and then he would let himself completely fall apart, break down, cry, or whatever he had to do, scream, and then he would just get back up and go till he broke again. And that's basically how he survived this. After 5 nerve-shredding months, the phone rang. It was December 5th of 2012, and the family minister called to tell Drew to come down to City Hall right away. There was a major break in the case of the missing girls. 2 girls had been found deceased more than 20 miles away. A day later, Chief Deputy Rick Aben with the Black Hawk County Sheriff's Office confirmed that the bodies belonged to Elizabeth and Lyric. It tears your heart apart. In one way, you're relieved because they were found and you don't have to worry anymore. But then you're like, you feel guilty, he said. And then Drew Collins broke down. You feel guilty because you just felt relief because you knew where they were, but they're dead. And you're like, how can I feel relief when they're gone? It just really fucks you up, man. Drew Collins still can't wrap his head around how, on the middle of the day on a Friday, nobody saw anything. By 2017, authorities had interviewed more than 1,000 people and investigated over 300 sex offenders. 12 years have passed since the girls were murdered. But that just means over 4,000 days where Drew Collins has grieved, trapped in purgatory. It's all consuming, he said. It doesn't go away. And you're stuck in 2012 wondering what happened to your kids while everything else continues to go on normally. What were their last moments like? What did they do to my daughter? Collins knows that the killer is still out there. He believes that it is very possibly that they still live right under his nose in Evansdale. Unless you were from this area, Drew said, you would never even know that the fenced off spot where the girls' bikes were found even existed. While heartbroken, Drew has never lost faith that this killer will come to justice. He just hopes that the Netflix documentary might urge someone with knowledge to step forward. They might even think they got away with it altogether. And you know, I'm not going anywhere. I know the police ain't going anywhere, he said. He takes comfort in the killer's discomfort, knowing each day could be the day that the police come knocking at their door. That's the hell they live in, he added. One of these days is going to be the day, and the police are going to be knocking on their door. Elizabeth and Lyric's family members and family friends set up the Elizabeth Collins Foundation, and it's a charity to provide funding to assist in solving cold cases of missing persons. So it's been 12 years since hunters found their bodies. And investigators are still searching for who abducted and killed these Iowa cousins. They say that this isn't a cold case, that it's still active, and they're still working it. 8-year-old Elizabeth and 10-year-old Lyric were out just riding their bikes near this popular recreational area in the middle of town. Lord, it's a block away from the police department where they were taken. July 13th, 2012 will forever be etched in the memories of all of us who lived in the region who remembers the case when the girls went missing. Investigators found their bikes and this pink purse near the lake hours later, but Lyric and Elizabeth were nowhere to be seen. When hunters discovered Elizabeth and Lyric's bodies in a remote wildlife area in Bremer County 5 months after they went missing, the area where the bodies were found was about 25 miles from where the girls were last seen. It is still devastating every day to not have her, Heather Collins, Elizabeth's mother and Lyric's aunt, said in a 2022 interview ahead of the 10th anniversary of their abduction. Drew Collins also spoke to KCCI on December 5th of 2024, the 12th anniversary of when their bodies were found. Whoever did this is a monster, he said. They shouldn't be out. They don't deserve to breathe free air. I don't want them to do this to another family or another child. Every day I wake up with this. It doesn't go away, and I will never stop until I find out who did this. They deserve justice no matter what. The girls didn't deserve this. Whoever did this needs to pay, Drew says. Authorities have never revealed the cause of death to the public because they believe it is information only the killer would know. So they've kept much of the crime scene and what was found with the girls quiet. Federal authorities and Evansdale police believe the killer is likely familiar with Evansdale and saw a window of opportunity to kidnap and kill the girls. Investigators said the culprit may also have attempted to abduct children in the past and may have tried to change their appearance after the girls' deaths. Lyric's parents, Dan and Misty Morrisey, have both received prison sentences for unrelated drug charges. At the time, their involvement with drugs fueled much speculation around this case, and authorities now say they do not believe Lyric's parents were involved at all in this incident. I think people are confident in saying they didn't have an active role, Mitch Mortvet, head of field operations for the Iowa Division of Criminal Investigation, said to KCCI in a 2017 interview. However, that doesn't rule out anything coming in the future. The Iowa Division of Criminal Investigation said it has followed up on over 2,000 leads in this case. They said they also monitor sex offenders in the Waterloo area and other surrounding areas. Around 2017, investigators looked into Jeff Altmeyer, who was charged with trying to entice children in Jasper, Monona, and Grundy County by offering them $100 to get in his van. Court records show he was working as a traveling automobile damage field inspector. 2 other people have confessed to the crime, but authorities eliminated them after finding out they did not know any intimate details about the case. Investigators have also drawn comparisons to another crime that happened in Delphi, Indiana in 2017. The Indiana State Police compared notes with Iowa investigators, but said despite similarities, there was no reason to believe that the 2 cases are connected. And Richard Allen was recently convicted of the Delphi murders and sentenced to 130 years in prison. In the 11 years since the tragedy occurred, no arrests were ever made. Lyric and Elizabeth families continue to get updates from state investigators, and the Iowa Division of Criminal Investigation says the investigation is ongoing and still active. Myers Lake is now called Angels Park, and memorials for the girls are everywhere. To mark this 10-year anniversary, the city hosted a 10-mile ride and drive to raise money for Crime Stoppers. And the Cold Case Foundation has also been established in honor of the Evansdale girls, the nonprofit organization dedicated to helping families of missing people, started in 2022. the Elizabeth Collins Foundation partners with Cedar Valley Crime Stoppers to bring awareness to cold cases in hopes of garnering new tips and leads so that other families can find closure. The reward to find the person who murdered Lyric and Elizabeth is now more than $100,000. And if you have any tips, you can email the Division of Criminal Investigation at dcis.info@dps.state.ia.us, or you can call the Cedar Valley Crime Stoppers at 855-300-8477. We just recently had the anniversary on December 5th of the bodies of Lyric and Elizabeth being discovered. I think the most important thing that can be garnered 12 years after this open investigation is that we have to let the public know that it is still an active case and that it is still being worked on. People still want to know what happened to Elizabeth Collins and Lyric Cook-Morrisey. Who took them? What did they do with them after they took them? Why were they not found for 5 months? So little evidence was found, but yet great evidence. Their bikes, a purse, a cell phone were found on the trail. Was there DNA on the bikes, on the purse? After the families have reported the girls missing, thousands of people joined in multiple searches. Hunters would be eventually the ones who found their bodies. I believe it was a family that was out hunting, a mother, a father, and their grown son. At the Seven Bridges Wildlife Area, which is about 24 miles north of Evansdale, and investigators did determine that they had been murdered. These killings that happened garnered national attention and left a very lasting impact on this small, tight-knit community. And no suspects have ever been publicly identified, but police have looked into other high-profile cases involving children. Michael Klunder kidnapped 2 girls in Dayton, Iowa in 2013. One escaped, and Klunder killed the other and later himself. But investigators determined he was not a suspect in the Evansdale case. Investigators' efforts to unlock information eventually led them to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children in Alexandria, Virginia, for advice. And they believe that the killer or killers were familiar with the Myers Lake and Seven Bridges Wildlife Area and with the children. Rieger has been on this case since 2012 and became the lead agent in 2017. Since taking over, he has received 547 tips, with 270 of those coming in since 2022, a decade after the girls were killed. Since the case began, more than 2,000 tips have been submitted to the DCI. And according to Rieger, the DCI will investigate leads from recent tips during a dedicated 3-day investigation period for this case. Rieger encourages anyone with information on the case to email a detailed tip to Our Missing Iowa Girls at dps.state.ia.us. It's important for it to be in the people's eyes because they continue to need to provide information. Somebody knows something, Rieger said. Cedar Valley Crime Stoppers is offering a $100,000 reward for any information leading to the arrest of those responsible for the deaths of Elizabeth and Lyric, and anonymous tips can be made by calling 300-8477. The state of Iowa should be passionate about seeing this case resolved, Rieger said, and that's what we're going to do, solve it. Evansdale held the 12th annual Memorial Ride and Drive for Elizabeth and Lyric this past summer. And the money that was raised from that event will be and was donated to the Cedar Valley Crime Stoppers. After the cousins' deaths, the city of Evansdale turned a small island at Myers Lake into Angels Park Memorial Island. It is a memorial not only to the girls, but also to Evelyn Miller, Danisha Hill, a 13-year-old Waterloo girl abducted in 2006 and found murdered in Illinois, and Lindsay Nichols, 22, murdered in March of 2012 in Jessup by her boyfriend. There are others that are being memorialized there as well. I recently had the pleasure of going to Evansdale and meeting Drew Collins and spending the day with him. And he took me to all of the locations that were pertinent in this investigation. And I will tell you that my mind says this person is local to Evansdale, Indiana. This person is local to Waterloo or somewhere in that vicinity. But they have ties to Evansdale because they would have to know where this location was where the girls were taken. They would also have to know where the location was where the girls were deposited. They were thrown away like trash along this river. And it was just, they were just left there. And when they were found 5 months later, there wasn't much left, but their clothes were there. They were strewn everywhere by animals and so on and so forth. To know this as a parent has to be the most devastating news that one could get. Drew told me the day that I spent with him that he had hope of finding the girls for months, that they would still be alive. The FBI told them that they thought the girls were still alive. Now it seems that the girls may very well have died very soon after they were taken. But where they were left, people actually went out there and fished. So it's hard for me to believe that they wouldn't have been found. But it was not a huge attraction, I don't think, as one might think. But I do believe that there are people of interest. A gentleman came forward that found the girls' bikes that afternoon and went to authorities and told them that he found the girls' bikes on that Friday afternoon when he was out riding, and he moved the bikes off of the trail because they were just laying in the middle of the trail, and he moved them so you could get past. But he didn't come forward until Monday, even though everyone was searching for these girls that whole weekend, and everyone knew about it. This man also got a lawyer right away and refused to be interviewed by police. These are all red flags to me as a person who covers true crime. And I'm sure they're red flags to law enforcement. And I'm sure law enforcement has been diligent in checking this person out. There are other people too. There was a gentleman that saw the girls riding their bikes that day. He was out watering his lawn, and the girls drove by or rode by, And he said that he spoke to them. And so he obviously knew them. I think this person should also be looked at, and hopefully was looked at very, very closely by law enforcement. Elizabeth was 8 years old. They called her Lizzie. Her parents, Heather and Drew, and 3 siblings, miss her dearly. She was very social. Her 3rd grade teacher would describe her in 2017 and say she was always the last one to finish her lunch because she was always talking. She had a smile that would light up a room. And I can't get over how much she looks like her father. Lyric Cook-Morrisey was 10 years old when she disappeared. And Misty Cook-Morrisey and Daniel Morrisey, her parents, her grandmother and aunts helped raise her because of the issues that her parents had with drugs. Lyric loved gymnastics. She loved the Disney Channel. Lyric was a very worldly girl for her age. She didn't know a stranger, Drew would tell me. And she also was allowed to go a lot of places that he would have never let her go out alone by. And because of this, she was much more worldly than Elizabeth. Elizabeth was much more protected. Lyric and 2 other cousins gave themselves the nickname the Bradford Bad Boys after a music video by one of their favorite bands. The girls are missed each and every day, and the monster who took them absolutely deserves justice. And we need to keep looking and keep the focus on this case. If you guys aren't familiar with the Dylan series, it appeared on HBO Max, Taken Together. Make sure that you go out and check it out and watch it because it's gut-wrenching. I've watched it quite a few times since my trip to Evansdale, and I will tell you that standing at Elizabeth's grave and feeling Drew's emotion that day that I was with him, and the heartbreak that this father still carries 12 years later is unbelievable. Heather and Drew ended up in divorce, which so often happens after the death of a child. And then when a child has been brutally murdered, it's even more gut-wrenching. Parents, I've talked to you guys on my channel at length about parents who lose children and how we grieve differently from one another. And that is one of the biggest reasons why marriages dissolve, because you kind of, there's a number of different reasons, but seeing that person every day is a constant reminder of what you've been through. Trying to be strong for one another, being strong for the other doesn't allow you to grieve yourself. It becomes so overwhelming, the emotion, that you don't know where to go with it. And I speak from experience of losing my son to cancer in 1988. He was 4. But I can tell you that even today, all these years later, it is raw. I've always described it as a wound that has scabbed over, and it doesn't take much to break that scab off and to get it bleeding once again. I saw that raw emotion with Drew when I was with him. I'm glad I went. It makes me understand Evansdale so much better than it did prior to. It's kind of like I felt when I went to Delphi. Um, when you go to these locations and you actually witness them and you see them, you see the remoteness and you see the layout. It is absolutely important when you're covering these cases to get that understanding and to get that feel. And I'm so glad I had that opportunity to go and to meet him. I'm going to have Drew on the show soon. So we will be talking about this case with him. And I'm looking forward to being able to introduce him to all of you. He's a wonderful human being, such a kind man. And I feel for him. I want to help him in every way possible to keep the word out about his little girls and the fact that these girls aren't forgotten. We still think of them, we still remember them, and we are championing for their justice. Thanks, guys, for tuning in, and I will talk to you all soon.